How much do we normalize sinful behavior? Today we're going to be talking about how the music you listen to, the movies you watch, the TV shows you watch, the books you read even, are all normalizing sin and how it affects our lives and the choices we make. So, to jump right into it, I wanted to just ask you your opinion on what comes to mind. For me, I guess I'll open up with why this came to my mind, is I was talking to some people about how music we listen to can, even in cussing or talking about sexual acts or drugs or things, can normalize these actions. And the immediate face value that you might think of is, we'll go with cursing. If I listen to music that has a bunch of profanity in it, and then I go and I stub my toe, or something happens and profanity is the thing that comes to mind, then it's starting to be normalized in my brain of, oh, that's normal. It's what comes to my brain immediately. And I've had that sometimes with, I don't necessarily think like secular music is bad in and of itself, right? But I have noticed if I listen to explicit music, especially too much, when I get into certain moments and I think that in my brain, I'm like, whoa, I need to just cut that out, right? Because it's leading me to think that way. It's normalizing it in my brain. So that's why it came to my mind today of what I wanted to talk about. So what do you think when you think about that?
To me, I think of the eyes and the ears are the windows into the soul. So when we listen to things and when we see things, it just goes straight to our soul. So we normalize these things, and it's so subtle how the media's done it, like so subtly and so gradually that we don't quite notice everything that's being, put out to us. And so, like, I think of movies, like how we've kind of seen the change in movies going from like, good old Cars to, now we're getting into like some homosexual like agendas and all this stuff like that doesn't need to be there. Like you can see that because it was not so gradual. It just kind of happened with the movement of, all this wanting to be accepted. That's kind of what I think of when I think of the media just changing. And I think also what you were talking about with like songs and stuff, just that constantly being something that you're hearing, because a lot of times, I mean, as humans, we like music. Like it's just something that we all enjoy. And I think it's something that God created for us to enjoy. But when the devil tries to twist things and be like, creating certain agendas and certain, artists' songs and all these things that we like we like the artists, we like the songs, but now the devil's starting to twist things into it in his agendas. Then it's the eyes and the ears are windows into the soul. So we're just seeing all these things and now our soul's agreeing with it. And it gives, Satan legal power over us to continue to torment us with those things. So that's kind of what I think about, but I mean, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, something that comes to my mind that I do, that I think a lot of humans do in this area, and it doesn't have to just do with what we feed ourselves, but is the idea of making small compromises in a direction. Like, oh, I'll just listen to this music, and then we start listening to it more, and then it's in our brain. And now the first thing we think of when we stub our toe is that word. So I feel like the small compromises, the listening to it, the normalization of these acts starts to make our brains think that way inherently. And I've heard this, I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard it from somebody that said, it's kind of like when you walk a path in a forest, and you know how when a lot of people walk the same path, you can see the dirt in the grass because it's been walked over and over. And it's kind of like that in your brain of like, when you think the same thing or hear the same thing or see the same thing over and over, it starts to become a path in your brain.
Yeah.
And then when your brain is going to think, it goes down that path because
Right.
it's an easy path to go down. And so then it's just like a readily available thing that your brain goes to. And so I think that's what we do with sinful activities or things, is we normalize it.
Side note, do you think that that's why Jesus is like narrows the path and few find it, because it's not
Walked
as
on.
trampled upon? Like that's why it's so hard to find, and you got to almost make your own path to get to where you want to go. So
that's a very good point, that the path to death is like so wide open. It's got a paved road.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it's ready to go. That's a really good point. I do think that it's so nobody goes down it,
Mm-hmm.
And so it is hard to find. It can be hard to find. And I think even when we walk down it, sometimes I think as Christians, we think it's going to be easy, but it's not. I mean, you're going to have to push through things, right? There's going to be trials and tribulations. And so I do agree with that. I agree with that a lot. So I do want to read a verse real quick before we keep going, because I think the heart of it all is reading verses and diving into God's word. So I got Ephesians 5:11 says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. And so it's kind of what we're doing today is we're trying to shed light on the fact of normalizing these sinful things. So
yeah, we wouldn't be like, I don't think we would be like hating on it and like calling it out if it wasn't wrong. You know, like we're not just here just trying to like throw shade at something just to throw shade at it. Like there's obviously an agenda and a uprising that the devil's trying to use through it, like to gain power and control over you and what your thoughts are and like how you think. I mean, because you got to think like the devil's really good at what he does. He's been around for, I don't know, as long as time, right? And so he's got all the schemes in his tool bag and he's using them through media and this music and movies and how accessible these things are to us. Like you don't really have to go very far to like hear a song or be able to hear it, like go look up a song or look up a movie. Like it's very accessible. And so to me, it makes sense that the devil's trying to get into that and be like, hey, because that's so accessible, it would be a good conduit for me to press an agenda or me to, you know, get to this person and influence this person to do this certain thing. Right. And then we were talking about music and I'm going to go back to it because that kind of is where the heart of, I think what we're talking about today, like music, it's weird to me. Like, you know, even in my parents' generation, there wasn't as many school shooters. And now we see them like, you know, once a month, once a week. And it's terrible. But I mean, I think that like the music kind of starts to influence those thoughts. And I'm not saying that the music is the only issue, but like when you hear, you know, these gangster rappers or whatever talking about, oh, I'm going to kill this, I'm going to do this. And like, then it starts to influence your heart and your brain to be like, well, this is okay. And that's kind of what we're like trying to call out into the light and say, no, that's wrong. Like, here's what God's word says. So,
yeah. And more on that, it's also in that, I mean, in that way, it's more than it's, oh, this is okay. It's also almost as if they're saying, this is what's cool. This is what makes you famous. This is what the cool dudes do, right? Because all these rappers are now famous and people look up to them and they're like, dude, that's rock on. That's cool, right?
yeah.
And so then they listen to it and they're like, I want to be like that. And so then it's, although it is normalizing it, it's also saying, hey, you should go do this because this is what's cool. Mm-hmm. This is what's up. This is where it's at. And if you do that, maybe you'll be looked upon in a good light, right? Because that's what we want to be, is like we want to be viewed as something highly, or we think it's fun because they said it was fun and we start to think that way. So I think that's spot on correct on the music of how they lead us to do other things. I think rappers can often talk about, you know, violence. I mean, not all of it. I listen to rap. I like Christian rap. I think there's good things in rap, but I think music in general talks a lot about, you know, violence or drugs, sex, money, all these things that when we listen to, we start to want to pursue that because that's what the music is pursuing. And so we pursue it as well. I think an easy one is money for me. In all honesty, I like watching money grow in the bank account, right? And that's something I got to watch myself. Is like if I listen to music and they talk about seeing that giant number of money, right? I can often find myself liking that or being persuaded
agreeing
by that.
With it.
Yeah, and be like, oh yeah, that's where it's at, right? And that's wrong of me because I'm starting to normalize in my brain to be greedy and to run after money.
And to idolize things.
The money, yeah, exactly. So that, I mean, there's so many things in music that we start to normalize that I just talked about. So sex, drugs, money, profanity, all these things. And we just listen to it over and over and it just becomes normal in our brain. So,
yeah, I actually heard somebody the other day and I don't remember quite who it was, but he said, if you knew it was chasing you, you would chase after God. And it kind of feels the same way with like artists and music. Like if you knew like the deals they were making behind, you know, the screen, and like the deals that they were making with all these different entities and all these things, like to say certain things or to like, you wouldn't listen to those things. Like you would get as far away from those things as possible, because like you would understand, hey, this is not just somebody saying words. This is like more than just words. And it kind of like, I also saw something that like people will put like chants and stuff into their music. And so when people sing it, they're like legally giving entities like power over them, right? And so you really got to be careful of like, okay, what am I feeding myself? What am I letting myself like indulge in? Like even with movies, like I don't know if you've ever watched a movie. Like recently I watched a movie where they were like saying stuff in a foreign language, and I got a little uneasy, and I was like, wait, this doesn't like feel right. Like they're doing some kind of ritual on screen or whatever, like, and they're chanting in some language I don't know, right? So I don't know what they could be saying, right? And so you just get this uneasiness. And so I think we got to be careful and realize like, hey, there's more at play than just having fun watching a movie. There's more at play than just, you know, sitting with your friends and like doing whatever, like listening to a song. Like there's like legitimate contract agreements on the line, like when you're listening to certain things. And I'm not saying like this is a, you know, every single person's got something in their music or on screen. No, I'm just saying like you really got to be careful and be able to discern and say, hey, that's not okay. And I'm not going to agree or associate myself with those things.
Yeah, I was listening to a Christian podcast, and it was talking about Taylor Swift released a new album. I haven't listened to it, but they were talking about in one of the songs, she said something about making a deal with the devil, right? And Taylor Swift has got so much fame, and in a way, I feel like as the fame has gone up, she's gotten worse in a way. But people still listen because now she's famous. She's what's popping in the world, right? And so people just keep listening, and she can put more of this stuff in there, and they still listen to it. But the reason I brought this up was actually because she said about making deals with the devil. And it made me think of, I was taking a class at college called Christian Worldview, and we were talking about how Mr. Sin, which is like a personification of sin, like as it's a person, right? Mm-hmm. And the person of sin, Mr. Sin, always overpromises but underdelivers. Like sin will be like, dude, I will give it all to you, man. Like here's what's on the line. He's promising all these good things, and then when you do it, it underdelivers. Like we have this hole in our heart, and we're like, oh, I'll fill this up. Mr. Sin's like, I'll give you all this. And then we do it, and we're like, wow, the hole's still there. And it underdelivers. And then for some reason, we keep trying it over and over. And it makes me think of, I want to say it's Benjamin Franklin that said, insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And so we sit here and we try the same thing and think that it's going to give us what it promised, but it always underdelivers. And I thought of that in thinking of like making deals with the devil, is it's never worth it. Like the promise or the deal he's showing you it's not going to pay out. It's not going to work out in the way you think it is. It's not going to work out in your favor. So.
Yeah, we were just talking before this about like how, like the controlling like spirit of certain things. Like, I don't know if you've recognized this, but like the new David movie that just came out, like it, you know, shattered box offices and all that. And, you know, so the people of the country and in America, like we're not inherently like craving these things, but they're just being pushed in our face. Right. And so it takes a lot more courage to stand up to it, I guess, because there's not as much, you know, demand or product for what we're wanting, right? Like we're wanting these good, wholesome family, like good, you know, Bible idea movies and songs and all this, but we're being fed something else, right? And so having the courage to not just bow down and listen or watch certain things and to seriously like make a stand and be like, hey, I'm not going to like agree with this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to find a different alternative, or I'm not going to do it at all. Right. I think it's important for us to like have, you know, the back to stand up to that and be like, no, that's not how me and my family or, my friends are going to go and, listen to these things. Like, we're not going to bow down to your agendas or whatever. Like, I think it's so important to have that like view and that perspective, because there's going to come a day where that's like all that's being put out. Like, we're getting close, but there's still stragglers and like, good things being produced, but there's going to come a day where it's just complete badness, and you're going to have to stand up and be like, no, that's not how this is going to work. Right. And so just the spirit of controlling and wanting to control the way you think, control the way you act, and how you do certain things that you normally wouldn't do, but because you're listening or watching certain things, you're influenced to do those things. So, I mean, it's just a dangerous area to be in, where you're just bowing down to whatever is easy. Where we were just talking about that trampled road, it's easy to go down the trampled road, but it's harder to cut your own trail and to have the Word of God be your light unto your feet and be able to light that path and really find the, light. And so it's so much easier to just lay down, but we got to have the back and the will and the courage to say, no, I'm not going to bow down to that.
Yeah, when you said that, I thought of how it's normal and easy for us to lay down to that, but sometimes we don't to other things. And what I thought of is like your diet or certain things. I feel like for a lot of people, it's pretty common nowadays to have people that are, gluten-free, or I won't eat this, that, and the other. I won't get into all the things out there, and they're not, I'm not saying they're bad, but people do these diets and they don't want to eat certain things that are bad for them. But when it comes to movies and music, we don't want to cut it out. It's not a big deal to us. But for sugar or sodas or things, we cut those out because we see the wrong in them and we're like, oh, that's not good for me. But for some reason, we don't see the bad in the other stuff. And so I think that's very interesting that we don't do that. But one thing that we feed ourselves in movies is like nudity, sex, and stuff like that. And so I want to read this quote from Christian Index. It says, the same thing has happened with premarital sex and adultery. Because of the sexual revolution in America, illicit affairs have become so commonplace that sex is exchanged as casually as a handshake and as flippantly as a high five. Sexual images are televised into our homes on a consistent basis, and advertisers have learned that sex sells. It has been said that as human beings, we have a lizard or reptilian brain that responds to certain primal urges, one of which is sex. What used to cause us to blush heartily causes us to blink now. It's all a part of the devil's scheme to normalize any kind of sexual behavior. So when I read that, I think of my dad said this before when we're watching movies, of the saying, sex sells, and how the industry puts it in there because statistically the movie will do better. It'll sell more. It'll be watched more just because of that, which is wild to me that we watch that and that has that effect on us. I mean, it makes sense. Our fleshly desires run that way. It makes sense. But it's just crazy that they put that in there so they sell more. They make more money. And out of their greed, they put that in there. And then for us, we start to normalize sexual behavior because it's in the screens. It's in the movies. It's in the TV shows. Even good ones that you're like, you hear, oh, that's a classic. You got to watch that. And then you go watch it. It still has it in there. And it slowly just becomes normalized because it's in everything. So I think that's kind of like just a crazy shocker of how it's everywhere. So.
Yeah, when you're saying that, like, I'm thinking about, kind of lost it, but I'm thinking about like certain movies and like how you're talking, it's just slowly brought in and now it's normalized. And I think of like all the people at my school, and I'm not claiming to be like a outstanding person or like perfect or anything, but I'll hear certain little its and bits of like things that happen at, for instance, parties. There's certain things like, oh, I did this with so-and-so, and it's so like heinous to me. But when people are talking about it with each other that we're at the same party or like different parties, like they just talk about it like it's normal and like it's just like, that should be shared to the world. Like, it's not like they're being quiet about it. They're talking about it in class and they're doing all these things. And like, to me, I'm like, dude, that is the most heinous thing I've ever heard. Like, and it's just because like I've turned myself off and I haven't allowed myself to get into a position where that's okay. Right. Where my eyes and my ears are not in a position where that's normal. And it's kind of like that path. Like, I haven't let myself go down that path yet. I'm not saying that, I'm perfect and that I've never, seen or heard anything that has been like heinous, right? But just that atmosphere of people being like talking about this stuff like it's okay. Like, I had sex with so and so the other day, and like, we did this and got drunk and did drugs and did all that. And like, it's like, whoa, like, why are we flaunting that into the public? Why are we making that sound like it's cool? Like, that's not okay. And just that idea, and that it's just very controlling, like kind of what we were talking about. Like, it's been so gradually normalized in movies and all this that it's just become like public knowledge to everybody, that everybody is, it's not even like surprising anymore when you hear about things. And that's so sad to me.
Yeah, we don't even feel conviction anymore. Like, to say it to others that I did whatever. It's just like, oh, I did this. And in a way, we're proud of it as humans that we do that. Yeah, that is crazy. And that's another way we normalize things, is just talking with people, of like putting yourself in a good crowd. Like, we need to do that, because if you're in the bad crowd, you just sit and you hear things and you're like, oh, well, that's normal because he did it, or I can do that because my buddy over there did it. And we just start to normalize it because we're in that bad crowd. Everybody's over here drinking, and it's going to be hard to say no to drinking when your whole friend group is out there drinking, And so normalizing things like that, and just the group you're around. Another way we normalize things is social media, just like Instagram and things. Seeing posts of your friends doing XYZ, and we just start to normalize what we see on reels and everything. It's all in a way normalizing our brain when we see sinful behavior happen over and over and over again. And when we see it over and over and over again, we start seeing the wrong. We stop seeing the wrong in it, and we start saying, "Oh, it's just something else." And then I feel like when you know what's wrong, and then you normalize it, and then you fall into it, it's just a horrible place to be in. And so we have this verse, Hebrews 10:26-27. If we sin willfully after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. And I mean, that goes along with Romans 6:1-2. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. Like, the right way to go, and then we're normalizing it, and we're just going to keep running to it. Like, oh, well, that's what's normal. No, you knew the right way to go. Like, it was right in front of you. You were taught that as a kid, and then we just kind of walk away from it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because of the movies, because of the songs we listen to and the friends we're around, we walk away from what we know is true. Even though we've heard that it's wrong so many times in our brain, we see where other people do it, and we just do it.
And not only do we know that it's wrong, the law of God is written on our heart. And so you're going to have an internal conviction when you're doing these things, no matter like how deep into it you are. Like, because ultimately deep down, that's not okay. But yet you're right. We run to these things like, and I think of people who, they're on, drugs or doing whatever, and they come to Christ, and then like they run back to drugs, and like they know about Christ, but they keep running back to the thing that's comfortable, right? And they run back to the thing that's normal, or what seems normal to them, right? And it kind of seems that way with just like media and stuff. Like, we run back to it. Like, I've noticed myself, I've kind of had to stop watching like reels and shorts, because I've realized that it's consuming so much of my time, that it's unhealthy. It's not okay. And I had to sit there and be like, no, that's not okay. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, I would run subconsciously to shorts, like anytime that I had free time, where I could be doing something else. I could be like, growing my knowledge of whatever, or, working on something, or doing, something productive for my brain. But no, I run to the shorts, and I run to the quick gratification of just scrolling. And I had to stop myself and be like, no, you don't have power over my time. Like, you're not in charge of me. And so I had to cut it off, and, I haven't had a problem with it since, but just like realizing it's the realization of it to me, like realizing that that's not okay and there needs to be a change. I think a lot of people like realize that it's wrong, but they don't see the need for a change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And so the last thing I have is the example in the Bible that I thought about when we said we were going to do this topic was Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, we know biblically that was a city where it was just all hell was breaking loose. This was a city that was, we would think of like Gotham and modern movies, right? People just were doing whatever they wanted to, having sex with whoever, however, whatever, like animals. And like, that's where the term sodomy comes from, is because animals, they were doing it with animals and all this stuff. And so any living thing that was breathing, they just would have sex with it or do whatever they wanted to with it. And they just had no self-control. And God's looking at this city. He's like, man, this city sucks, right? And he's like, he says to these angels, go find me, like, one good righteous person, I think, in the city. And so the angels are going around, I can just see them, entering as like travelers, and immediately people are just wanting to, they're free game. They're new meat, they're fresh meat for the grinder, and they're there. And so everybody's trying to like get on top of them and like have sex with them. And so they finally get to Lot's house, right? And these people are knocking at Lot's door and saying, we want to have sex with whatever, like these new people that you got on the block in your house. And he goes, no, you can't have sex with them, but you can have sex with my 2 daughters that have never been touched by anybody. Me personally, if I was God, I would strike him down right there. But God is faithful, and he leads Lot and his family out. But I mean, just to think, Lot was the only righteous person in the eyes of God there, or in the eyes of these angels who were going to go look or whatever. He was the only righteous person, and yet he was like, oh, you can't have sex with them, but you can have sex with these people because that's okay. Like, it was so normalized in the culture and how controlling it was. Like, just like, we're going to get to that place in America if we're not careful of just Sodom and Gomorrah, where everything is okay. There's no just checks and balances. And we're going to be like Lot, where it's become so normalized to us that we think it's okay, and it's really not. Like, we look at that story and we're like, that is a terrible thing you just did, Lot. You just offered up your daughters, and you should never have done that. Like, looking at it from this side. But in that culture, right, that probably seemed innocent to him. And so we've really got to be careful and not let these ideas and these agendas that the devil's trying to throw into certain like medias. We can't let that normalize, or, we can't let that take hold of what is normal in our society, or we're going to become just like Sodom and Gomorrah, and we're going to have no self-control. We're going to have no just way to see the light, because we're just so bothered down by all these things that we think are normal, but are really not. Like, so that's it's good that we're talking about that, I think, because we got to bring to light and say, no, that's not okay. And the Bible says that everything in the darkness will eventually come to light. And so we can, throw like shade at whoever, we think, but eventually like dark is going to come to light, and the things done in the dark is going to come to light. And so, it's not a scary thing, but we do need to recognize it and be like, hey, that's not okay. And so that's kind of where I stand. And I think that that's a good biblical example of like what happens when we let everything just become normalized and let these things slowly become a problem. Like, we need to root them out now. So
that's a really good point. Something I was thinking of when you were talking about that story is something that's, I think, really dangerous that we might do, is we use the Bible to normalize sin. And I heard a speaker talk about how people will use a verse when Paul says, the righteous things I want to do, I don't do, and the wicked things I don't want to do, I do. And we as humans can go, oh, well, see, like, I don't want to do this, but Paul said he didn't want to do it, and he does it, so I'm going to do it too, even though I don't want to do it. And then we justify it and normalize it with the Bible. Or normalize it with the fact that in the Old Testament, like you're saying, there are so many things in there. Like Abraham, like this dude when God was like, hey, I promise you I'm gonna give you a kid, he's like, I'll take it into my own hands, and he goes and sleeps with Hagar. And then you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We could easily read things like that and normalize it using the Bible, which I think is a very dangerous place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
To read parts of the Bible and be like, oh, well, this dude in the Bible who I would look up to did it, so I can do it too, because it's normalized, right? Like, that's a dangerous place to be in too. So I think one of the things to wrap it up is to talk about how to fight it, how to battle it. And so when I think about battling it, number one, an easy way to do it would be when it comes up to recognize what's wrong. Instead of just opening up your ears to listen to whatever music or watch whatever shows, I think there's something healthy in, when you see it, recognizing what's wrong in it. Like, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Because when you recognize what's wrong, it starts to battle the idea of normalizing it into being what's right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, an easy way I do it is if I start to feel it normalizing something in my brain, I cut it off, right?
Yeah.
If it's normalizing something, you got to nip it in the bud, cut it at the root. Like, don't stay in it and be like, well, I'll just fight it really hard, but keep listening to the music. Well, no, if you're starting to normalize it, just cut off the music. And if you love the music that much, maybe you love it too much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those are two ways. And then a third way would be getting in a group that normalizes following Christ. And it's just about plugging yourself into a church or a good group, or like me and you getting together and just encouraging one another and normalizing, like, running after Christ. Because when you see others around you doing that, it can encourage you to do it yourself. So that's how I would battle normalization.
Yeah, I think, the Bible says, guard your heart above all else, for everything flows from the heart. And so how do we guard our heart? We guard what we hear, what we see. Because when we guard those things, then our heart is more pure. Like, if we're letting all these things in, like, our heart's going to be sick no matter how healthy we think we may be. Like, it's just going to be sick because we're just allowing all these things to infiltrate. And so guard your heart, guard what you see, guard what you hear. And I think that's ultimately how you nip it in the butt, like, and stand up to what is trying to come up, through the media, is just be like, I'm not okay with this. And then here's, for the other side of it, if you're already knee deep into it, right? You got to just have the guts to stand up to it, like, and just be like, no. Like, being able to say no is hard in our culture today, but I mean, it's not a dirty word. Say no. Like, you've got to sometimes just be able to say, no, you're not in control of me. You're not going to control the way I think. You're not going to control these things. And you got to take control of your own life and stop letting those things control you. So that's all I got.
Yeah, and one last thing is, sometimes when you're trying to cut it out, you'll have to cut out things that you don't necessarily want to cut out. And I think that can be hard. Maybe it's a friend or something, and you're like, dude, but there's good in this section of it. But if you have to cut that out to cut the rest out, you got to do it. And it makes me think of when it's like, if your eyes cause you to sin, gouge them out. Mm-hmm. Like, the eyes are a great thing. Look at the nature around us that God's made. It's such a gift. Yep. But it's saying, if it's causing you to sin, gouge it out. And so you might have to give up things you don't necessarily want to. And then to end us out, I'll quote Galatians 5:19 through 21. The works of the flesh are evident. Those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So don't normalize sin and cut it out the best you can, and just keep walking and running after Christ is the whole topic that we talked about today.
Stand up to darkness. I mean, you've got power over it. Like, Christ has already won the battle, so we can have the confidence to stand up and recognize that he's going to get us through, or he's going to help us to fight whatever we feel like is unfightable. Like, he's given us the power to stand up and to fight and have courage against these things. So,
amen. Well, hopefully you're having a good day, and hopefully, if not, we made your day a little bit better.